Third part. But you're too late. Tears glistened in the boy's eyes. Glittering, they slid down his cheeks, stopping at the jaw before falling to the floor. I wanted to go home, back to our little cabin in the valley. I wanted to go home to Mom and Dad, to Jan and Paul and Maggie, to work in the garden with everyone, hunt beasts, sit down to dinner together. I wanted to hear Gia's songs, too. But now it's too late. Deep in Chulus's eyes, a dull red glow began to shine. At the very least, you could join me, sis. And become like me. It's not really true that you went around killing all the others, is it? Don't kill me, at least. Chulus. Tears rolled from Iriya's eyes, too. The letters on the wall changed. The workings of the girl's mind were having an effect on the mysteries encoded in her DNA. Forgive me, Chulus. I have to. You need to. Please don't kill me, sis. If you do, I'll... The boy grinned evilly. Chulus? The sacred ancestor characters looked as if they were about to change again. I'll do this. Chulus snapped his mouth open wide. Iriya's eyes were drawn to the noble's fangs, a sight to make even the most indomitable human look away. Forgive me, Iriya said, all emotion vanishing from her face. The boy sailed into the air, like a shooting star freed from gravity's bonds. He zipped straight toward Iriya's face. Iriya's right hand came up. There was no sword in it for a counterattack. Sister and brother became one, melting together. Not as family, but as human and noble. A flash of silver fluttered through the air. The world stopped, so that the boy, who'd circled around behind Iriya, could show his intentions of burying his fangs in his sister's pale throat. When movement returned, the boy thudded to the floor. His little head left his body, and bright blood shot out. Chulus. Iriya stooped down and picked up her brother's head. The eyes opened. Sad and weak, and they were the eyes of a human. I'm sorry, sis, he said, moving lips covered in blood. But your throat, my teeth marks, aren't on it. I'm glad, sis, you didn't end up like me. Darkness and light tinged his face, and in one of those stark flashes the boy breathed his last. Iriya didn't hold the head close, but rather set it down on the floor by her feet, then folded her hands together and recited what seemed to be a sadly perfunctory prayer. The letters on the wall had stopped. They'd ended when she decapitated her younger brother. You must tell me, Dee, the Count insisted. You should understand. You of all people. Dee was gazing at Iriya. The hoarse voice murmured, Are there going to be side effects? Her Heaven and earth shook violently, and before they knew it, everything was sinking into the floor. No, into the water. Laughter echoed from beneath the grey floor, and as Dee, the Count, and Iriya watched, the floor rose up like a mountain. From a spray of water that rivaled a waterfall. No, not water, but a spray from the floor. The enormous form of the mighty Viscount Kraken came into view. "Is that what it takes to master water, Kraken?" Count Langlin bellowed, and his disappointment was understandable. The skin on the giant's face and hands was as swollen and purple as a drowning victim's, while his enormous form wobbled like a sack full of water. A thin covering of mold grew on his skin, and those dead fish eyes of his contained not a single spark of vitality. So, this was a noble who lived in the water. This was another shape for the nobles who danced their splendid waltzes in the moonlight, lent their ears to minstrels' tales, and whistled tunes up and down highways of indestructible metal that ran all the way to the moon. Even the sight of you is revolting. Die, Kraken. From all over the ceiling, red beams of light converged on the titanic figure. These were no ordinary lasers or heat rays. They were bizarre beams of scalding light. They were bizarre beams of scalding heat that evaporated water alone. Swirling with steam, the water boiled. Viscount Kraken's colossal form was rapidly changing shape. Be the water you so love. Become steam, and spread across the entire planet. Life comes from water. Kraken, it is you who... In the midst of his roaring laughter, Count Langlin was pierced through the back and chest with a transparent stake. A stake made of water. One twist of it sent the Count's body flying against the wall behind. And as that wall had been transformed into water, Langlin sank halfway into it. A different opponent charged the giant head-on. When the hunter's blade pierced the nobleman's heart, the gigantic figure became a wave of water that swallowed Dee. Pain enveloped the hunter. As descendants of the nobility, Dampiers feared running water. They wreaked havoc with their metabolism and left them unable to breathe. Dee rose through the water, but there was no surface to it. "You are within me," Kraken said, his voice ringing sharply through the hunter's head. "You cannot escape. I will not let you go. Experience the same agony my wife and daughter did before they perished. You shall be joining them. And know you this, my mastery of water springs from the teachings of the sacred ancestor. No one but those of his line could ever defeat it. Dee, prepare to meet your maker." At that point, crimson wisps enveloped Dee's face. Before Kraken realized the hunter had bitten through his own lip, Dee swung his blade. Such a cold, cruel face he wore. Fangs peeking from between the lips that had given him the taste of lifeblood. "Dee, Are you too a descendant of the nobility? Perhaps it took the sword of a damned man to slay the damned, because these blades slice through the water, and he leapt it into the air through the cut. Though a number of watery spears jabbed after him, a flash of silver mowed through them all, reducing them to splashes of water that fell back onto Viscount Kraken's split belly. Impossible. The enormous figure drifting on the floor said in a dazed tone, "The only thing that could destroy me is the sacred ancestors. Could it be?" His voice gave out at the same time his body dissolved. A wave bore down on Dee, but he skillfully landed on it and rode it out. His feet hit the floor. It was firm. With Kraken's death, the water's spell had also been broken. Iriya lay in front of the door. Dee was just about to go to her when a dying voice called out his name. Embedded in a wall that had regained its solidity, Count Langland called to mind a bizarre sculpture. His right hand pointed straight ahead. The letters on the wall were still emblazoned on its surface. "Please, tell me, Dee, what does that mean?" Dee went over to the Count, whose face was already a rictus, and placed his left hand on the nobleman's brow. Several seconds passed, and then the Count's eyes opened wide with astonishment. "I can read it, Dee, but this... Is this the truth? Only, that would mean... failure. Side effects were too great. Dee, you alone were a success. Were a success." And then the Count's neck snapped. Stepping away from the body that was quickly turning to dust, Dee turned around. "It was a failure," he murmured. But who would hear his words? Nobody save one. Iriya. How long had it been since she'd risen to her feet? How long since she'd pulled his sword down off the wall? How long had she been staring at Dee that way? How long had her eyes been tinged the color of blood? Or had fangs poked from between her lips? And who was Alucard? With a beastly howl, Iriya charged at Dee, and Dee kicked off the floor too. When the two figures passed each other, Iriya fell with blood on her chest, and Dee turned around. As he looked at Iriya, his expression was cold. That's what it meant to be a hunter. Lying on her back, Iriya watched through eyes fogged by white smoke as the young man sheathed his blade and walked toward her. "Dee, what did I do?" He didn't answer. "It seems I did terrible things. Lots of them in every town. In the town of Clements, on the night before she donned the wedding dress." Who was Alucard? "You know, I'm lonely. I don't feel anything. Killed my brothers, my sister, and wasn't the least bit sad when... Is that possible? When I was myself, when I was afraid, Even having someone with me, it didn't make me happy. And to think, I'm going to go out feeling anything. I'm going to go out not feeling anything. Hey, where are you going? Dee soon returned. Iriya. Beaker looked down sadly at her. When she saw how his eyes glistened, Iriya's eyes filled with tears as well. You've made me so happy. Beaker, thanks. I'm glad. So glad. So scared. But I'm happy you're here with me. Her voice dwindled rapidly. Miss Iriya, Beaker whispered. Iriya's eyes, just about to close, shifted. Chillos. Is that you, Chillos? I'm so glad you came to see me off. Do you mind if I ask you something? Can't remember just when, but I get this feeling. I heard Gia's song, as if her sister was here with me. And Jan and Shaq and Paul and Maggie too. They all came. How nice. I'm glad. Dee took his left hand away from the forehead of an ordinary girl, with a smile on her face. Iriya had left with her family. Iriya, the boy murmured. I don't know what to say. Say goodbye. Dee told him. Page break. A long time had passed since a fresher goodbye had been carried off by the wind. In a tiny hamlet near the ruins of a certain noble's castle was a graveyard with a small grave. The sturdy rock tablet was inscribed with the name of a certain family, and the mason who'd carved it could well remember the young man of unearthly beauty and the innocent boy who'd ordered it. There was also an aged gravekeeper who recalled a young man who paid a visit on the same day every year. Just once did the gravekeeper ask that young man his name, as he offered his prayers at the grave. The young man smiled, but didn't reply. And then one evening, years and years after the stone had been erected, the gravekeeper visited the cemetery and found a figure in black before the grave. The nearsighted gravekeeper didn't get a good look at his face, but as the man rode by on his horse, he asked in a voice like iron if anyone ever visited that grave. Yep, every year without fail, he replied, at which the young man on the horse is said to have smiled quietly. Putting that smile there is the only thing in my dull old life I'm proud of, the gravekeeper would always say. He never tired of telling the tale. The end. Iriya the Berserker, Volume 23. Written by Hideyuki Kikuchi, illustrations by Yoshitaka Amano. End.